Have you ever walked up to an organ and thought the console looked very similar to a 737 cockpit and wondered how you will ever be able to control all of those buttons and knobs while playing with your feet? Do you have to be superhuman or have additional limbs to control the king of instruments? Of course not. Throughout the centuries, many new organists have felt the exact way you currently do. Well, maybe organists in Bach's time didn't compare an organ to an airplane, but certainly they might have been apprehensive approaching the instrument. Luckily, in 2020, we have many more resources, both technologically and pedagogically speaking, than ever before. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss resources for the organist to better understand and practice pedal technique, discuss some easy ways to quickly get up to speed, and show how an instrument can help make a pianist or someone who has issues with pedals sound like a virtuoso in a real-life situation. While our modern instruments provide us with tools to make even the most beginner organist sound like they have been playing for years, there is nothing more enriching than learning to play the instrument as it was intended to not only expand your technical facility, but to also widen your repertoire. Before starting organ study, it is important to have a solid keyboard technique and understand the basics. Adding the pedals will add an additional level of difficulty, and worrying about your manual technique will distract you from proper study. First things first, there are tried and true methodologies out there that can help the beginner learn how to properly play the pedals. I recommend 3 texts that I have personally used in both my studies and teaching. Number 1, The Method of Organ Playing by Harold Gleason. 2, The Organist's Manual, Technical Studies and Selected Compositions for the Organ by Roger Davis. Number 3, The Complete Organ Method, a classic text on organ technique by John Stainer. These texts are designed to help the beginning organist practice and develop a sound pedal technique by introducing exercises and simple pieces. For example, let's take a quick look at the Gleason text. The Gleason text is not only recommended for the beginning organist, but also to the seasoned organist to remind them of very important articulation rules, registration information, and different schools of ornamentation. I don't know about you, but I need reminding of these not-so-simple topics here and there. While a strong piano technique is required for beginning organ study, piano and organ keyboard differ in subtle ways. From attack, release, and articulation to legato versus détaché, we need to learn the basics. Gleason outlines these techniques before diving into pedal technique, as should you. Let's spend some time with the pedal technique section and discuss some basics that can get you up and running. It is important to first understand Gleason's use of pedal indication nomenclature. To take a closer look into this technique, I will demonstrate a simple passage. When going through this exercise, we should remember the proper playing position. Be sure the bench is properly placed. Sit in the exact center of the pedals and manuals. Your nose should be in line with the D above middle C. Always play on the inside of each foot. Turn the legs to reach intervals with alternating toes. Try not to turn your body. Feel the gaps to make sure you are playing the correct pedal notes. Now, let's actually go through an exercise and employ this proper technique. While exercises and method books are great to work on your pedal technique, there is nothing better than working on real repertoire and working on your technique through pieces that have practical application. I recommend working through Bach's 8 Little Prelude and Fugues, The Complete Practical Organist by Guilmant, the 24 Pieces in a Freestyle by Vierne, and for the more adventurous organist, with a very good manual technique, the 24 Inventions, Opus 50 by Marcel Dupré. All of these scores are available free of charge on IMSLP. Once you have mastered these works, you should explore the breadth of organ repertoire and slowly introduce new rep that really excites you. If you don't like it, you won't practice. The most important role an organist plays is leading song and worship. While we might all aspire to play Widor's toccata to a packed audience, there is nothing quite like accompanying a packed congregation and feeling the energy of congregational singing. So how do we make the organ sound like an organ when we cannot play the pedals? How do we even start learning a hymn? Let's go through the hymn Amazing Grace, first with manuals only. As you will notice, while all of the parts are represented, you don't have the foundation of the pedal line. By adding the 16-foot stop in the grate, you add a little weight, but you have now thickened the texture and made it more difficult for the congregation to sing and get correct pitches. Note that people sing at the 8-foot pitch, making the 8-foot stop the most important for congregational singing. While this type of playing might work for small congregations, it is not ideal. Let's discuss ways that we can learn this hymn and apply this technique to other hymns and pieces. For a hymn like Amazing Grace, I suspect the manual parts will not be a problem, and you could simply sight read these lines. If not, no problem. You could take the time learning the manual parts and pedal together. First, go through the hymn and mark all your pedal markings. I have done this for you already. Please feel free to pause the video to copy pedaling if needed. Now, go through your pedaling. Make sure it makes sense and feels natural. While something might work for someone else, that does not mean it will work for you. Now that you have mastered your pedal, let's add the right hand, adding the soprano and alto lines. Now we are systematically learning 3 of the 4 parts. Add this next step at a much slower tempo. You should not be a tempo in the learning process. Speeding up too quickly will undoubtedly introduce mistakes into your playing, which will be very hard to unlearn. Be mindful, concentrate, and diligent in the learning process. After mastering this step, let's concentrate on the tenor and bass line. This should be much easier than adding the 2 upper parts because now we are just concentrating on one line in the manual. Again, you should be observing slow practice. Do not speed up until you are satisfied you have successfully learned each passage. Now, let's put it all together. Slowly play each chord, all parts together, and move to the next chord when ready. After going through the entire hymn, identify tricky spots and go back and work through the progression. Inevitably, especially in more contemporary hymn writing, you will come across a progression that is not natural. Spend some time working through your fingering so when you play a tempo, you are able to not even think about the passage. Now, as comfortable, increase the tempo. Since you learned each specific part slowly and meticulously, you should be able to play through this hymn with ease. While you increase your skill and technique, you might not need to go through each step for each hymn. But I always recommend slow practice, as this is the only way to assure you are able to learn and fully digest the part writing and intricacies of each hymn and piece. Let's now play through the hymn and see our final result. Now, what happens if you are called to play a funeral and you only have 2 days to learn a brand new hymn, and you will only have about 1 hour to prepare because you do not have access to an organ? What do you do? While this is a situation many of us have been put in, luckily our modern organs can help us. Why not use technology if it is available? If you are playing a newer Allen organ, you will have 2 controls that will make playing manuals only not only a breeze, but make you sound like you are playing the pedals and even soloing a melody. These controls are bass and melody coupler. Let's explore these further. Do you remember how thin this texture was with manuals only? I will again play the opening phrase to remind you. Now, I will add the bass coupler, which couples the pedal to the lowest note in my left hand, basically the bass line. Now, do you notice the full sound in all 4 parts? This simple tool really makes playing manuals only sound like you are playing the pedals with ease. Now, what if you want to solo out the melody? Wouldn't a nice solo crumhorn be a great addition? Let's take a listen to the first 2 phrases with the melody soloed on the crumhorn. This is not an easy skill, and one many people cannot just sight read through. Allen also has a tool to help solo the melody line, the melody coupler. I will demonstrate this now. With these simple tools, I am now able to sound like I am not only playing the pedals with ease, but also have the ability to show off a solo melody line. While you should always work on honing your skills and learning these important techniques, these tools are there to help you in a bind or to simplify your job while learning. Pedal technique, while something that is not entirely natural, can become comfortable with studying a good method, working through exercises, gradually adding appropriate repertoire, and adding pedals to our hymn playing as soon as possible. Be sure to always incorporate slow practice into your routine to make sure you are executing the proper technique as well as playing the right notes. And remember, even Vidor was once a beginner.